Program is not to be confused with medical or legal advice. An appearance on this platform is not necessarily an endorsement, but as always, we encourage you to do your own research. Enjoy the show. Good evening, everyone. And, of course, welcome back to another exciting episode of Red Pill News Live. I am so grateful to be back sleeping in my own bed, to be in the arms of my loving wife, and to have my loving pets laying with us in that same bed. I am also eternally grateful for the incredible people that I got a chance to hang out with this weekend at the Great American Restoration Tour in Cocoa Beach. Big shout out to Micro Toolmaker. It was so awesome to actually meet you in person as well, my friend. Where we go one, we go all indeed. Thank you so much for the support, and thank you very much as well for the subscriptions handed out to the people over there on Rumble. You guys make sure that you give a big thank you to Micro himself. Big shout out as well to Trump One. Glad you're back from guard. I'm so glad to be back. Thank you to Red Gun 51 for the can as well. You guys are the best. We have so much to talk about today. You know what they say? When one door closes, another opens. And a big door is opening this past week. Now, while I was gone, there were a couple of key things that took place. We're going to be catching up on a couple of those little things, and then we're also going to be expanding it to discuss how it is affecting events that have already begun this week. My goodness, things are really heating up. Thank you, everybody over there on YouTube, for hanging out with us. If you wouldn't mind, please hit that like button on any platform that you might be watching on. That really does help. If you leave a comment in the chat, also maybe think about leaving a comment below the video. And I'm going to need you to sit back, relax, and grab your popcorn, because we are about to get into it right about now. All right, family, friends, Red Pill 78 viewers, all of you, no matter where you are, whatever platform you're on, I really do appreciate you guys. We have so much wonderful things to discuss. I have a lot of really interesting things to share with you today. Thank you very much for joining us, and hope you had a great weekend. I know that it's always difficult when I'm not here on the regularly scheduled days, Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern, but let me tell you, there is nothing quite like getting together with a group of like-minded people, hundreds of people who just want to have some community and some chill time together. And, of course, the event itself, I mean, just getting on the panels with all of my friends from Badlands and being able to have discussions on things that we might not even get a chance to talk about on the air because I don't get to do shows with all of those people. It really is pretty amazing. And, you know, if you guys have been watching the show for long enough, then you may remember when I first showed my face on purpose back in 2019. It was my birthday, August 30th, 2019. 6 years ago now that I showed my face on purpose. And I said at that time that I think that what we really need to work on creating here is a community so that we can truly band together for the common goal of saving America and now creating the golden age that President Trump and this new administration is helping to usher in. And I feel that we are closer to that now than we have been at any point in the past. And to be able to be in a group of like-minded people, friends, such as I have over at Badlands Media, and then also to parlay that into an opportunity to have these regular events all over the country, meeting incredible patriots from all different walks of life, people who are regulars at the Great American Restoration Tour, and then this time we had a ton of people who were first-time attendees. There is really nothing like it. So if you don't know, and maybe you're watching over on YouTube and you haven't seen me for the last couple of years, I also do regular programs several times a week over on Badlands Media. They do have a YouTube channel, but that frequently does get shut down. But you can also find them and all of the work that we do at Badlands over at Rumble, on X, and over at pilled.net. Those are guaranteed places where you can watch our shows because we have programs beginning at 10 a.m., and sometimes even earlier, going all the way up until midnight or later. And if you want to check it out, rumble.com/Badlands Media. Go to Pilled, just search Badlands Media. Go to X, search Badlands Media. You can find all the stuff there. I do Altered State with Brad on Wednesdays. Brad Getz from Where We Go When We Go All. I do Baseless Conspiracies with John Harold on Mondays at 10:30. That is later on tonight. On Thursdays, I do Taken Aback with, quite frankly, and Adel Nero, who is also known as 412 Anon, if you're an OG Anon. And then also on Fridays at 10:30 p.m., we have a show called Only Lands, which is just us kind of hanging out and talking about whatever we want to. Before we get into the stories for today, let me first give a big shout out to today's sponsor. That's going to be my friends over at onenessdrops.com/redpill78. If you use that link, if you use the code redpill78, you'll get 15% off of everything they offer. Primarily, they offer chlorine dioxide water purification kits. Chlorine dioxide is a miracle substance that you can use to clean your water if it is unsafe, unhealthy, dirty drinking water. If it's full of microbes, bacteria, all sorts of nasty, creepy crawlies, you can use chlorine dioxide no matter where you might be. You might want to keep some in your medicine cabinet at home just in case you lose the ability to get clean, fresh water from the tap. If you're a hiker or a camper like me, it's great to take with you in case you have to get water from a stream or a brook or maybe even a stagnant source. So many different ways that it can be used, and chances are pretty good that it's already being used in your regular local municipal water supply, because it is a substance that even NASA sends with the astronauts when they go on missions to space, if you believe in that. Anyways. But chlorine dioxide is a pretty amazing substance. It comes in a 2-part solution. You mix it up, and then it creates it through the miracle of modern chemistry. Maybe not even modern chemistry, just chemistry in general. They also have mullein extract tincture for lung health and soursop extract tincture for cellular regeneration, and then also DMSO, which is a substance which has been widely documented to be very successful for wound care, for muscles and tendons, and a whole bunch of other things that you can find out if you go to my website, redpill78news.com. Go to the news section. You can find a blog post about DMSO. You can also find a blog post about how to use chlorine dioxide and what it is typically used for. Chlorine dioxide we also have in a mouthwash form. Lisa and I use it for our teeth. We also use it for the dog's water as an additive to clean their teeth because they're getting too old to go to the dentist. But regardless of that, go check them out. They are a longtime sponsor of the show, and they really make it possible for me to do what we do over here. Yes, Jojo Starbuck, that is totally fine. Yes, you are. Yeah, it's not something you need to worry about. And if you have any other questions about it, you can go find the interview that I did with the maker of a documentary about chlorine dioxide on my Rumble channel, and I would highly recommend checking that out. Now, I wanted to show you guys this picture. You probably have seen this picture. This is President John F. Kennedy with the Resolute desk, and who is that peering out from under the Resolute desk? Well, that is none other than John F. Kennedy Jr. This is an iconic picture. At the time that it was taken, it really encapsulated what was happening in America. We had a family in the White House. There was the joyous sound of children running, laughing, scampering through the West Wing. And then, of course, all of that was taken away from us when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. But John F. Kennedy Jr. remained someone in the minds of America. And for many people, Donald Trump has picked up the mantle from John F. Kennedy and John F. Kennedy Jr. because they were friends. Now, I have been told that if John F. Kennedy Jr. had survived his likely Senate bid against Hillary Clinton, that he probably would have ended up going and running for president. And Donald Trump ended up being the sort of stand-in for John F. Kennedy Jr. When his friend had his life very quickly taken away from him, it was President Trump who stepped in to complete the work that JFK Jr.'s father had begun back in the 1960s, and that JFK Jr. undoubtedly would have done himself. Now, I bring this up in a sort of humorous way because if you take a look here at these pictures that were just shared recently by Mark Wayne Mullen during a meeting that he had with President Trump, we can see here in the Oval Office, President Trump sitting behind the Resolute desk. Now, when you're president, you get to choose the desk that you have in there. President Trump chose this iconic desk for a reason. You can see here that they're going over some of the things that the various issues that they want President Trump to address. And you can look around the office at the decor. President Trump is such a classy guy. I love the way that he's decorated the White House. They've got that stealth bomber there on his desk. You've got JD over here speaking with somebody else, not exactly certain who. Mark Wayne Mullen is right here. But when we get to this last picture, what I want to draw your attention to is this photograph that Donald Trump has behind him, behind the Resolute desk. And it would appear to be, when blown up, it would appear to be a picture of Donald Trump sitting behind the Resolute desk. And who is that under the Resolute desk but a full-grown Don Jr.? It is Don Jr. sitting on the floor, peeping out from under the Resolute desk. They are intentionally reenacting the famous photograph of JFK and JFK Jr. Now, you've got also a picture of Barron and, of course, the lovely First Lady Melania Trump. This is on President Trump's second inauguration day. But now the reason, now it's pretty blurry, and I am inferring that it's Don Jr. And the reason is because the hair is pretty dark, but also it would appear that he's got a bit of a salt and pepper beard, just as Don Jr. does. So I thought that this was one of the coolest things that I've seen, because even though President Trump is the leader of the free world and he's helping to usher in the golden age, he is still having fun with being the president, and he is a master troll. So I love you, President Trump. That's so cool. Freedom76 says, I missed you. So glad you're back. Thank you very much for that, my friend. I really do appreciate it. All right, so moving on from this, I absolutely love President Trump. He's got such a great sense of humor. One of the things that happened while I was gone was that Secretary of War Pete Hegseth delivered a rather poignant speech at the National War College in Washington, D.C. Now, in pretty much the same way, President Trump is seeking to clean up in general the United States of America. Each of his cabinet members are working within their own individual sphere of influence to clean up the bloated bureaucracy of the federal government. So at this speech at the National War College, this took place on the 7th, Pete Hegseth, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, essentially declared that the most significant threat to America's strength and sovereignty comes not from abroad, but from within the defense establishment himself. My friends, this was nothing short of an opening salvo of a war cry against the military-industrial complex. So, Pete Hegseth was introduced by Deputy Secretary of War Steve Feinberg, and in this speech, he essentially criticized the entrenched bureaucracy that exists at the Pentagon. Now, remember, this is the same type of bureaucracy which allowed for $2.3 trillion to go mysteriously missing, only to be announced on September 10th, 2001, and then to never be spoken about ever again, because mysteriously on September 11th, the very ring of the Pentagon where the audit of this $2.3 trillion was being done out of, well, it just happened to be the portion of the Pentagon that was hit. And then, of course, that meant that all of the records, the only records that could have been used to determine exactly what happened to that $2.3 trillion, well, they just disappeared. This is the same type of bureaucracy that leads to $500 hammers, maybe even more expensive hammers, porta potties that cost tens of thousands of dollars that you would expect to be gilded in gold, or perhaps a single bolt for a Humvee or a Bradley, which might cost $1,000 in and of itself. This type of bureaucracy allows for the fleecing of the American people and for the weakening of the American military establishment. If we're going to effectuate peace through strength, we've also got to clean up our own house. Now, for decades, The Pentagon has evolved into one of the most complex bureaucratic systems in the world. Do you guys know that they currently employ over 750,000 civilian workers? The budget, as I know you know because we've talked about it before, is over $850 billion. There is so much money flowing in and out of the Pentagon. It is rife with opportunity for fraud, waste, and abuse. Inside the Pentagon, this entrenched bureaucracy has led to an expansive network of committees, consultants, offices that are redundant, and it's draining the resources of the U.S. government and weakening our military readiness. Now, despite record spending at the Pentagon, a lot of it ends up vanishing. It just goes out into the ether, ends up being spent on administrative overhead, on delayed contracts, on consulting fees that may never result in anything tangible ever being produced. And again, at the end of the day, it decreases our defense capability and the military readiness that the United States must have if we are going to exhibit that peace through strength. According to auditors at the Pentagon, nearly $220 billion, so roughly a quarter of the Pentagon's budget each year, is unaccountable. That's right. They cannot account for nearly 1/4 of the money that they are spending every single year. So that means every 4 years, they are wasting 1 full year's worth of budget in expenditures that they can never track, that they will never be able to lock down. And it becomes a lot more obvious how the $2.3 trillion that was announced in 2001 money might simply also disappear into the ether. This is a figure that is larger than the entire defense budget of most allied nations. And yet many of these nations want us, the American people, to continue paying for them to keep themselves safe. Pete Hegseth, for a long time, has been an advocate, arguing that this type of bureaucratic sprawl has become its own ecosystem, and it rewards inefficiency and punishes innovation. If you're a person working at the Pentagon and you figure out a way to save money, chances are pretty good you might end up losing your job. Because if you save money at the Pentagon, that means money is no longer flowing into the coffers of this person, or perhaps you determine a way to make an entire department irrelevant. It's the same type of argument that has led to a bureaucratic morass that we have across the entirety of the federal government, why we need to vastly pare down the number of employees that we have everywhere. I mean, we simply cannot sustainably continue to employ people simply for the purposes of employing them. If they are not moving the mission forward, then unfortunately, they are no longer necessary. Now, here is my solution to that. If you are a federal employee, and we are now exiting this federal shutdown, so here is your opportunity. Prove your worth. Prove to your superiors that your job is necessary for the ongoing daily functions of the United States government. And if it isn't, be honest with yourself. Look yourself in the mirror and say, perhaps it's time I retire. Or maybe it's time I go into another form of employment. Maybe I need to get into the private sector. But ask yourself this question. Is it worth temporarily putting food on the table for your family if it means ultimately your grandchildren will never be able to afford a home to keep a family in? Is it worth it to take money out of the pockets of every other American if it means that you get a brand new Hummer every single year, or you get to buy an even fancier car than that? I would say no. Of course, I want to provide for myself. I want to provide for my family, but I also want to produce something of value. I want to produce something of worth, something tangible. And if my job inside the Pentagon is just making sure that a pile of papers goes from desk A to desk B, and that could be done by anybody who's already getting paid, then I just simply don't think you should be doing this. I don't think that you should be in that position, and you should probably be honest with yourself and be honest with the nation. Now, programs that have gone into effect that have been designed to modernize military hardware routinely face years and years of delay because they've got to go through all these different committees, all these different contracting offices. Basic equipment orders can require signatures from dozens of different individuals, and each one of those people is collecting a paycheck. Routine upgrades that need to be done to military equipment in order to keep our soldiers ready often cost taxpayers millions before a single prototype even reaches the field. I was watching a video the other day. A person, just a regular person, like a hobbyist engineer, was looking at mesh wireless communication system. And he found a system that the Pentagon had contracted to have built. It was like a multi-million dollar project. And this individual was able to duplicate that mesh communication system for a few $100s. Okay. So the cost of that system has baked into it each and every one of those hands all along the way. And then, of course, because these things are produced exclusively for the military, then the ultimate cost of those individual things are jacked up as high as the military is willing to go. And then we have contracts, which oftentimes are no bid. Getting into military contracting, supplying for the government, that is a pretty lucrative job to be in. So in the defense establishment, they end up consuming vast sums of money while at the same time producing less and even offering less in terms of real world capabilities. It was shocking to hear the Secretary of War speaking these words at the Naval War College. And since Pete Hegseth has taken this position, he's emphasized a couple of key things. He wants our soldiers to be combat ready. He doesn't want there to be bureaucracy. And he wants to reallocate funds from management divisions and put them into the things that matter. What do you want your soldiers to be able to do? Do you want them to be able to manage an office effectively, or do you want them to have the best field training? Do you want them to be on point in terms of logistics? Do we want our recruitment numbers to be necessary so that the United States can defend itself? Now, Pete Hegseth has also ordered a comprehensive audit so that we can determine which offices are redundant. If you think back to HHS, when RFK Jr. was restructuring that, he said that there were 17 different IT departments within HHS, each and every one of them doing the exact same thing. But because they wanted, I guess, faster access to IT, they just had them all in these little sub-departments, their own little buildings all around the campus. And if this works, then this is going to end up producing a long overdue overhaul of the system, which is now going to allow the United States government and the Pentagon to move quicker, to move faster, to be more responsive, and perhaps to even think more ahead in terms of what our potential enemies might be doing. Now, those global powers that oftentimes the United States is pitted against, I mean, they've already realized this. They're starting to channel their resources directly into weapons strategy, while at the same time, the United States has been spending money on paperwork, on oversight boards, on studies. And obviously, a lot of those studies were based in preparing the best DEI outcomes previous to Pete Hegseth becoming the Secretary of War and President Trump returning to power. But I want you to keep an eye on Pete Hegseth, because this speech that he delivered has placed him even more squarely in the crosshairs of those who might want to stop him. This was effectively Pete Hegseth declaring war on the military-industrial complex that has a vested interest in keeping the United States bogged down and spending as much money as possible. If we are going to usher in the golden age, then this, my friends, is a key component. So I just wanted to give a big shout out to Pete. All right. Let me give you also another interesting story. Over the weekend, I don't know if you guys remember, but a couple of months ago, I had brought to you a story of a Mexican cartel boss who had illegally entered the United States, and he was seeking to contact the administration. He had detailed information about weapons trafficking that was taking place between rogue Ukrainian elements and the Mexican drug cartels. Nothing came of that story at the time. And if you're over there on YouTube and you don't know what I'm talking about, you can go to my Rumble channel and all the other platforms, and you can find it there. There's about a 20-minute interview with this Mexican cartel boss where he talks about exactly what's going on. And essentially, what happened was, for the transfer of money and consumables, shall we say, from like Colombia, the rogue Ukrainian elements were trading weapons that had been given to them by U.S. military sources in an effort to fight off the war that they were in with the Russians. Nothing came of it at the time. I couldn't get the story to anybody who could do anything, and then the source disappeared. So over the weekend, I ended up getting it to some people who actually took notice. And literally within hours of that story getting into these hands, Ukraine went completely dark. There was allegedly a Russian ballistic missile that attacked the Ukrainian electricity grid infrastructure, disabling every single power plant in the country and completely plunging the nation into darkness. And I thought that was some very interesting timing. I'm not going to say that I was responsible for it, because of course I don't know. But certainly it was generally speaking pretty strange to see this happening so quickly. Now, I know the administration is interested in making sure that our weapons and our technology is not getting into the hands of the cartel. Currently, we have special operators that are planning 4 operations that will be taking place in Mexico, just as we have taking place in the Caribbean Sea. And little Peachy, it's going to happen a couple of times a year. I'm going to have to take a few days off. But just in the same way they are planning to go into Venezuela, not to overthrow the Venezuelan government, but to overthrow the cartel elements that have taken over certain areas of the nation. Anytime you have a narco-terrorist element that sets up shop in a country, they're going to be well-funded. They're going to have infrastructure. They're going to have the manpower. They're going to have the weapons to make it possible for them to take up residency, so to speak. We've got to stop that. We can't allow that to happen. I think it's entirely possible that we are seeing something like that here in Ukraine. Now, this moment that the power went out in Ukraine was actually captured live right here as Volodymyr Zelensky was being interviewed by what appears to be The Guardian. Take a look at this.
So this sky ship. Well, it's life.
Should we keep going?
Так, ми можемо продовжити.
Okay.
Правда, перекладача немає, ну, окей.
Let's try. Just on the question of British troops on the border with Belarus.
Yeah.
Because, it seems to me we need some new thinking, right? Fresh thinking. Would you like that? British troops actually
About
patrol?
this troop. About this troop. First of all, we spoke about it with our colleagues, European leaders and the United States. We spoke about it during.
So clearly, corruption has been a big problem in Ukraine for a very long time. Also today, one of Zelensky's closest associates, a man by the name of Timur Mindich, was targeted by a major anti-corruption operation. What was he corruptly engaging in? Was he perhaps engaging in the trading of things that he shouldn't be trading in? Was he stealing money from the country? This wouldn't be the first time that we've seen something like this happening. But the anti-corruption agency in Ukraine has ultimately gone after this key figure in the Kiev regime, a close associate of Volodymyr Zelensky. He's under investigation, and to make this even more serious, he has apparently actually fled the nation of Ukraine. Now, this is not Russian propaganda. This is not a story that was planted by the enemies of Ukraine. This is being reported by the Ukrainian press, the Kiev Independent and the Ukrainska Pravda. Now, this controversy around Timur shows one of the most insane stories of corruption. So he's a businessman, and he's reportedly at the center of this probe. He's got close ties to President Zelensky, and he's also got detailed financial interests in some pretty heavy industries there. He's the co-owner of the president's Kvartal 95 production company, and allegedly he's profited from his ties with Zelensky, and he's dramatically increased the amount of clout that he has in recent years because Zelensky has taken more and more power in an effort to try to stave off a full-scale Russian invasion. Now, here's another important aspect of the story. It was an investigation into Timur Mindich's activities by the National Anti-Corruption Bureau, NABU, which, to be fair, is the same organization that was looking into Hunter Biden when he was on the board of Burisma, and Joe Biden, to get the $1 billion loan guarantees, had forced the new president, Petro Poroshenko, of Ukraine to fire the Ukrainian prosecutor going back several years. But this investigation led to an attempt by the Zelensky team to actually eliminate NABU's independence back in July. We reported on that when it happened. We didn't know why it was happening, but it would appear that the Ukrainian government did not want NABU to get many closer than they already were. So the Anti-Corruption Bureau, coming from Ukrainian press, conducted searches in Kiev on November 10th at the personal home of Mindich. Law enforcement sources have gone on the record to the Kiev Independent to say this. And before they got there to search his home, Mindich actually fled the country. And he, in addition to having this partial ownership in the Ukrainian production company Kvartal 95, it didn't happen after Zelensky became president. He and Zelensky actually were involved in a business sense even before Zelensky became president. Now, this is an ongoing situation, and it is entirely possible that based upon the amount of money that's been flowing into Ukraine over the last several years, Mindich may have a healthy nest egg set up perhaps in another Ukrainian nation. Maybe he's got ties here in the United States. But whomever is going to be looking for Mindich is going to have all of that in mind as well, and the money is only going to take you so far. So we'll be anxiously looking to see where that is. Simon, you do remember that? Yeah. Okay, so Simon, yes, this is still me, buddy. The channel has not changed. The only thing that changed is that it's 5 years later, and I am, as a consequence, 5 years older. All right, now, I'd like to take you to Brazil, where the UN Climate Summit is soon going to take place. As a climate summit, you would think that the goals of the climate summit would be to, I don't know, improve the climate. One of the things that really does improve the climate is the number of trees that we have on planet Earth, because trees, they breathe in carbon dioxide, and then they exhale oxygen. And this is one of the things that is necessary for the ongoing life here on our planet. We live in an ecosystem where all of our different lives conduct various purposes, and all together we have this glorious system that God has created. We, at times, will breathe out, the plants will breathe in, the trees will grow, it will provide space for animals to live, their leaves fall to the ground, and then they create mulch, and then they go back into the soil, and they create the food that the trees are going to eat, and the same thing happens with us when we die. Now, for the UN Climate Summit, this is so incredible. It's taking place in Brazil, and so that's obviously where the Amazon rainforest is. You guys, if you're old enough, you probably remember years and years ago, there was a huge brouhaha about the clear cutting of the Amazon rainforest. And the fear was that the rainforest would be cut down, there would be no trees left, they would not be making oxygen, humans would die, and of course there would be no place for the animals to live. Well, in preparation for the UN Climate Change Conference, which is taking place this week, the government of Brazil actually clear-cut 100,000 trees from the Amazon rainforest to build a brand new state-of-the-art highway so that the attendees to the UN Climate Change Conference could arrive in style. Now, there are other ways that these people could have gotten to the UN Climate Change Summit. It was not necessary to clear-cut the Amazon rainforest and to create this highway for people to get there. However, this is the option that they decided to take. Now, this is the type of thing that the UN's own COP30 summit is probably going to tell you we shouldn't be doing. And it's another example of rules for thee, but not for me. In many places around the world, you're not even allowed to cut down a tree and use that tree for fuel for your stove. You can't create heat at your own home because, of course, when you cut that down, it creates more carbon and it goes out into the atmosphere. Well, when you cut down trees, those trees are not going to be there to absorb the carbon dioxide that human beings breathe out. And, of course, it does all of the other stuff that I already mentioned. So I don't understand the rationale that these people had for this, unless, of course, the answer is that they don't really believe what they're preaching to us. And I think we'll probably just leave it at that. All right. Now, big news coming out of the Senate over the weekend. There was a deal that was made. Enough Democrats joined the Republicans to invoke cloture and reach a deal on opening up the government. Now, the people who have agreed to vote yay in favor of this new motion for a continuing resolution to create appropriations which will successfully fund the government through January, each and every one of them, I think with the exception of one, is facing re-election in this next year, in the 2026 midterms. So, this continuing resolution finally passed yesterday after the 15th attempt. The vote was 60-40, and Republicans will be amending this bill and then attaching 3 full year-long appropriations bills for various things, which include SNAP benefits, the farm subsidies, and a whole host of other things which are just necessary to keep the country humming along. We will talk more about SNAP in just a moment, so don't get irate yet. Now, there were 7 Democrats and 1 independent, Angus King, who generally speaking votes with the Democrats. And he has also been, they were all Democrats and an independent voting with the Republicans, and 1 Republican voted against reopening the government. You may guess that Republican was Rand Paul. So we've got Angus King, independent of Maine, John Fetterman, Democrat of Pennsylvania, Catherine Cortez Masto, Democrat of Nevada, Janine Shaheen, Democrat of New Hampshire, Maggie Hassan, Democrat of New Hampshire, Jackie Rosen, Democrat of Nevada, Tim Kaine, Democrat of Virginia, Dick Durbin of Illinois, also a Democrat. So the House now needs to come back into session. They'll be back on Wednesday, and they're going to vote on this Senate-passed funding package. And, of course, the Democrats who had been seeking to keep the government closed until, I guess time immemorial, they were not happy about this. You had quite a few leftists who were going wild over on Blue Sky, and they're essentially calling for the naming, shaming, and probably a couple of other really bad things for these Democrats. Now, I want everybody to be aware that this continuing resolution has essentially given the Democrats who voted in favor of it nothing. There is nothing in this CR that is any different from the last CR, with the exception of the Democrats now get the opportunity to vote on 3 bills that they want to bring to the floor. Those are not bills that will pass. It is merely symbolic. There were also 4,000 federal employees that were furloughed during the shutdown. They will be allowed to come back to work if they want to. And there will be no more firings until the next vote on funding, which would be January, like late January. So really, it's no different than it would have been if we would have just passed this the first 14 times that they chose not to pass it. Ezra Levine, I don't know who he is, but he says, this is the message of a failed, feckless, and leaderless party. We need a party with backbone, and the only path to it is through a cleansing primary season. If your Dem is up for re-election and you aren't damn sure they're fighting the fascists with everything they've got, primary the bastard. So essentially, you've got war that has been declared amongst the Democrats and their ultra-radical left-wing base. And all of the messages are essentially them screaming out into the night. Now, Bernie Sanders also, of course, was not happy about this. He wanted the government to remain closed for the rest of President Trump's term. Chuck Schumer was also not very happy about it. He ended up leaving because he was so angry about it. And some of the other things that they are looking to achieve is the funding for the ACA or Obamacare. They want to keep those subsidies rolling in. However, those subsidies are likely not going to continue in the way that the Democrats had hoped. It is apparently looking to be turned around and have a far more direct benefit for the American people. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But let me say thank you to Make Sense to Me Too. NASA wrote an article a few years ago about the Earth being greener thanks to more CO2. And when dinos were here, CO2 was 2,000 parts per million, and the entire planet was a lavish jungle, no desert. That's absolutely correct. The more CO2 we have in the atmosphere, the more opportunity there is for plants and trees to breathe it in, and the more oxygen will be produced because we will have so much more vegetation. Now, President Trump was asked about the deal that was signed with the Democrats because people were suggesting that he didn't like the deal. But again, this is the same deal that the continuing resolution had been up until the moment that they finally voted for it, with the only exception being those furloughed employees. And we've got several more years to keep cleaning up the federal government. We're going to go ahead and take this. And President Trump comments, the biggest thing that he wanted to make sure people were clear on is that there will be no spending, no funding for illegal aliens in terms of health care.
Any questions?
You mentioned the senators that are here, Mr. President. Do you personally approve of the deal that's happening right now in Capitol Hill to end the government?
Well, it depends what deal we're talking about. But if it's a deal I heard about, that's certainly, they want to change the deal a little bit. But I would say so. I think based on everything I'm hearing, they haven't changed anything. And we have support from enough Democrats. And we're going to be opening up our country. It's too bad it was closed, but we'll be opening up our country very quickly.
Mr. President, that deal does reverse the mass firings your administration put through during the shutdown. Did you sign off on that, and will you abide by that if this passes?
Well, I will be. I'll abide by the deal. The deal is very good. We're not going to be giving $1.5 trillion to people that came in from jails and from, the gangs and drug dealers and all of these others that they wanted to be given health care, which would have hurt our health care system. I hope that we're going to be able to have a health care where Lindsay and I were discussing it, Jim and I were discussing it, and Katie, we discussed it. We want a health care system where we pay the money to the people instead of the insurance companies. And I tell you, we're going to be working on that very hard over the next short period of time, where the people get the money. We're talking about trillions and trillions of dollars where the people get the money. Yes, please.
Syria president, sir.
All right, so effectively, what's happened to the American healthcare system since the passage of the ACA, since Obamacare went into effect? Ostensibly, the reason it was passed was to make healthcare affordable for Americans. But initially, what it did was impose a lawless and unconstitutional tax on people who did not use the healthcare.gov website and get insurance through this system. It immediately raised the price of premiums for every single American, and those premiums have continued to go up every single year. I'm obviously self-employed, and Lisa is also self-employed. So we have health care that we purchase privately, and that health care every single year has gone up. In the years where I didn't have health insurance, sometimes it was okay. One time I had to go to the emergency room, and it ended up costing me like $6,000 to $8,000. I didn't even spend the night there. It was awful. And if I would have had health care, then it would have been less, but it still would have been a lot of money that would have been billed to the health insurer. Now, health insurance and the medical industrial complex in the United States of America, in my opinion, is a racket. And one of the reasons that healthcare has gone up exponentially is because they knew that the government was subsidizing it. It's the same with the price of college tuition. Once the United States government got into the business of providing loans to college students, knowing that the government would be subsidizing it, colleges began to increase the cost of tuition on a per credit basis. And that has continued to go up every single year. What President Trump is talking about is, instead of using money that we are making through tariffs, through increased funding in regards to the investment of foreign nations here in the United States, on top of creating jobs, infrastructure, reindustrializing the country, President Trump and HHS is talking about creating a healthcare system that will actually pay the American people so that they can use that money to pay for healthcare however they want. Now, I know a lot of people hear that and they think, well, how is that any different from just handing out free money, like what the Biden administration did or what they did during, the pandemic? I initially had that exact same feeling. But with the amount of money that they are talking about producing in terms of the tariffs and even additional tax revenue from businesses that are moving back to the United States, it sounds like something they could potentially do and it would have no ill effect on America. There is still money that they are talking about being able to use to balance the budget and to get us back to a place where we are no longer $38 trillion in debt. One of the things that we have to get under control is the out of control spending that is currently taking place in Congress. And one of the ways that we can also get everything back under control is by going after sources of fraud, such as what Pete Hegseth was talking about at the Pentagon. And here is another example of that at the Department of Labor. Secretary of Labor is talking about fraud that they are finding in the H-1B visa system. We will revisit the healthcare system in just a moment, but take a listen to this.
So you kind of brought up the H-1B program, where there are companies across this nation who use this program, but they've either abused it to get into the program or they're abusing it within the program. So I have launched an enforcement initiative, Project Firewall, to protect the American worker first against foreign labor and the abuse that these companies possibly have done. We have over 175 investigations that we've opened, and for the first time in history, as a Secretary of Labor, I have signed those investigations personally because we want to make sure that these companies are not abusing. We want to make sure that
there are companies that exist for one reason and one reason only, and that is to farm H-1B visa holders into the United States to take jobs from the American people, to lower the cost of hiring people to these companies. And then they also get a fee on top of that. Some of these H-1B visa holders are essentially placed in a position of indentured servitude by some of these companies. But now what they are doing is actually investigating. They will be seeking to criminally indict and prosecute those companies that are abusing the H-1B system. And they are now also incentivizing and essentially forcing American companies to hire American labor. And it is opening up the U.S. job market in a way that has simply not been available to people like us for some years.
Protecting the American worker first by, one, posting the jobs available to Americans. Two, if they do need to use
Nick, it's because my brain never stops working.
H-1B visa program, within the program, we have to make sure that they're paying those fair wages, not to depress the American wages. And if that employer leaves that company, they have to make sure that they're posting that with the government so that we know where those employers have gone and those employees. So it's...
Well, thank you, Simon. Appreciate you, buddy.
Been somewhat of a problem. But we want to protect the American worker first, and Project Firewall will do that. We will be actively investigating these companies if they're getting in the way of protecting foreign workers over American workers.
That's big.
So one thing that these companies have done is open up job listings only to H-1B visa holders. Now, here's something that you may or may not know. They are supposed to first open up a listing and everybody gets a chance to apply. But instead, if they know that you're an American citizen, they have essentially blocked you from being able to have access. It's almost like their own firewall against hiring American citizens. Now, this is the first time I've heard of Operation Firewall, where our own government and the Department of Labor is doing everything within their power to ensure that these companies are no longer doing this. American companies hiring American workers, ensuring that American families remain in the job market. One of the reasons why things have become so intolerable for so many is because we have been pushed out of the job market. American citizens, no matter who you are or what you look like, you have been at a disadvantage. You may or may not know that among recent college grads, those college grads who are overwhelmingly America first, they are just becoming that way naturally because they see what President Trump and the administration is doing to highlight the problems that Americans are facing. They are facing a 26% on average unemployment rate, meaning that you graduate from college, you have a great degree, something that you've been told that you should immediately be able to go out there and get a job. And 3/4 of those people may have access to the job market, but over 1/4 of them are fully unable to be hired in whatever it is that they're attempting to work at. And this is why people end up living with their parents for longer and longer. So I have a great respect for that. Another source of fraud. During the pandemic, the use of the SNAP benefit program exploded. We've heard in recent weeks that there are 42 million or more individuals, not Americans, but individuals who have been placed on this SNAP program. And it's one of the reasons why so many people were freaking out that the government was going to be shutting down. Whether they need it or not, people have been using this program, and that has been detrimental to America because it's a lot of money. Well, during the course of this shutdown, as I reported initially, the federal government stated that they were going to use that opportunity to get out there and audit the system. Well, the federal government and the Department of Agriculture has actively been rooting out that fraud the entire time that the government has been shut down. This is an investigation by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. They seek to root out all fraud, waste, and abuse inside the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. In one case, they found a single individual who was receiving SNAP benefits in 6 different states, 6 different cases with their name. How is it that that was allowed to go through before? There was another case where someone, a single person, had more than $50,000 on their EBT card. Stephen Vaden is the Deputy Secretary for USDA. On Thursday, he spoke about the efforts for reform that they're engaging in at USDA, and this was during a panel at the Federalist Society's National Lawyers Conference. Now, Vaden has admitted that SNAP programs do help people. This is what they were built for. However, there are so many people on SNAP benefits all throughout this nation that the ability to engage in a system of checks and balances without any type of proper income and asset evaluations produces an opportunity for many, many people to abuse the system. He also said that the USDA has launched data collection programs from different states across the country that participate in SNAP because they want to understand exactly where these benefits are going. And he went through several of these instances that I just mentioned to you, examples of fraud that has been discovered since the shutdown began. We have that case where a single person getting SNAP EBT in 6 different states, another person $50,000 on their EBT card. How many months did it take them to acquire that $50,000? What were they doing with that $50,000? Were they cashing that in? Were they using it to trade so they could get real money out of that? Or certainly I doubt that they were buying $50,000 in groceries. With this EBT card, it's basically a credit card. And if you're on the EBT SNAP program, all you got to do is slide that card. You can even use it on DoorDash. You can go with somebody else to the grocery store who perhaps has cash, but they want groceries. Maybe they're going to pay you 50 cents on the dollar. You walk out with cold, hard cash. And that EBT fund on that card rolls over month to month if they're not used. Taxpayers have a right to know exactly what is being done with their money. And for us to be told that we shouldn't be asking the question of where is our cash going? Because each and every one of us is paying for that through the money that we're putting into the United States government. We are spending more than $9 billion a month on SNAP benefits across the nation. Now, you probably remember at the end of last month, a federal judge had ordered that the USDA use some emergency funds that had been set aside. There was about $6 billion in a fund that was not meant to fund SNAP. However, the judge demanded that USDA use that $6 billion to continue passing out SNAP benefits through the EBT cards for at least the duration of the government shutdown. But as I've already told you, that $6 billion is less than the $9 billion that we're already passing out every single month. So there's no way that it would have gone to feed successfully all 42 million people who were using the program. And the participants in this program who received the maximum amount of benefits did end up, through this decision by the judge, getting 65% of their benefits in November. Now, it is going to take some time for the government to turn back on, so to speak. Don't know exactly when the full benefits and all of these other entitlement programs are going to start running. But right now, every dollar you give to someone who has more than $15,000 on their EBT card cannot go to someone who is truly in need. Perhaps there needs to be a set of checks and balances to maintain a level of awareness on how much money is getting stacked up on these EBT cards every month. If a person isn't using their benefits, maybe they don't need to keep receiving their benefits unless they're actually spending those benefits on groceries. There also, in my opinion, needs to be restrictions, strict restrictions, on the types of food that SNAP funds can be used for. SNAP should be used to purchase natural, high-quality, whole food ingredients. You should be using those benefits to purchase food, not junk food, not soda, not cookies, not Cheetos, not fast food from DoorDash. So the USDA is currently in the process of reallocating some 2,600 staff members across the country in places like North Carolina, Indiana, Utah, Colorado, and Missouri. These employees are going to the states where extra verification is needed. It's not going to cost the U.S. taxpayer any additional money. You may not know that the United States is already in possession of buildings all around the nation that are not being used. So they are just simply going to take up residence in a building that we've already paid for or that is already in contract to be paid for. And then they're going to be able to work out of those locations and then verify if the people who are taking these SNAP benefits should continue to receive them. And the ones who are not supposed to be receiving them, well, they are going to find themselves in a legal predicament. Now, take a listen to this.
So I heard this lady finna get 10 to 15 years in prison for food stamp fraud. Apparently, they got proof of who is defrauding the system, and they coming to locking people up. So the ones that be on Facebook and Instagram and all that talk about how you got stamps and how you just did this and this, they're coming for you. Y'all really think that these people don't see where these food stamps is really going? You think they're just giving y'all food stamps and not keeping track? Boy, they finna do a sweep, just like for the PPP loans, just like them drops y'all was doing. A lot of people feel like just because the local police ain't catch them and, you feel me, they ain't went to jail yet, that ain't nothing gonna happen. Sometimes the government sit back and let you do 10 years worth of bad stuff and then bring that rap sheet to the state and say, yo, this is what we want. They've been doing this for 10 years. Give them 10 years. Y'all better, boy, y'all better tighten up. Y'all better tighten up. They cracking down.
Every single person that was out there bragging on social media for the last month, for the last several months, many of them have already had their benefits cut off. For those who were doing it illegally, they are going to find themselves between a rock and a hard place, and that hard place is going to be the Department of Justice. That rock is likely to be the literal rock, maybe in San Francisco. I think that maybe, no, that's Alcatraz. If we reopen Alcatraz and fill it up with people who have been illegally stealing SNAP benefits, that would be so funny to me. Now, if you'll remember, she mentioned it right there, the PPP program. Remember how many people were abusing the PPP program during the pandemic? Those people thought that they got away with tens of thousands, millions of dollars because they could just defraud the United States government. They went and flaunted their ill-gotten gains, their Lamborghinis, their Mercedes, all of their fancy clothes and their jewelry. And guess what? Eventually, the law caught up with them. They fought the law, and the law won. The exact same thing is happening with the people who are abusing this program and keeping food out of the hands of the truly needy. And even for the truly needy, this is not a program that was meant to be a way of life. Yes, of course, there are people who are disabled. There are people who are unable to work. There are senior citizens who have depended on the idea that they're going to be able to survive on Social Security, and that's just not possible. Okay, so the SNAP program is the safety net for those people. The SNAP program is not for able-bodied young Americans who otherwise should be able to work. However, there has been a lifestyle that has been built up around the idea of living off the welfare state of the United States of America and not having to take care of yourself. Those days are over, my friend. Now, we also have some fraud, fairly significant fraud, that has been found within the Medicare system. This is shocking. Over 1 million identities of Americans have been stolen. We touched on this story last week, but this is a far more detailed breakdown coming directly from the Department of Justice. So these stolen identities are used to create fake Medicare claims. At least $14.6 billion has been siphoned out of the Medicare system. These false claims are being made, and guess what? This was a concerted theft ring that was being perpetrated by Pakistani executives, and they were operating out of Illinois as one part of this scheme. These Pakistani executives were charged in Illinois for stealing $703 million with this stolen Medicare data. You may remember, I believe it was a couple of weeks ago, there was a young woman who had lost her job. She was homeless. She was living in a tent. I want to say it was in Minneapolis. And she went to a resource center. And that resource center said, hey, if you're homeless, give us a call. There is a program that the federal government has to get you into transitional living so you can get back on your feet, get a job, and then go get your own place. She called them. She gave them her information. And that company took her information, stole it, and then used it to get money from the federal government, theoretically, to put her into transitional housing. But they just never called her. They left this woman dangling in the wind, languishing, living in a tent on the side of a river in the cold Minnesota winter. The DOJ has now charged 324 defendants. And that includes 96 licensed medical professionals, doctors, nurses, pharmacists. There have been 50 federal districts where this scam was taking place. We had networks of foreign criminals stealing more than $10 billion from Medicare using hacked data and then the stolen identities through the scheme that I just described to you. There was $4.41 billion in fraudulent claims that were held in escrow. $900 million of those claims had already been paid out to these foreign criminals. There was 15 million or more illegally diverted opioid pills that were prescribed through fraudulent means through telemedicine, using the identity of these individuals, American citizens, and then getting paid out by Medicaid. Not only were they stealing money from the United States government and out of your pocket, but they were also getting illegally prescribed opioids. And then I'm certain that those opioids were probably being sold on the streets, or maybe they were being shipped out of the country. There were fake car crashes that they would use to defraud insurers. I've actually shown you a couple of videos of this. This was a phenomenon that really took off in the last year or two. In Florida alone, $4.7 million in payouts for these fraudulent car crashes. And everybody wonders down here in Florida why your car insurance is so much. $245 million in assets were seized, including cryptocurrency. 205 providers have been suspended even before the raids began. This transnational fraud ring was using burner phones. They had fake clinics that were set up. They were laundering the money through crypto. And right here, Matthew Galati, he is the head of the U.S. Department of Justice's criminal division, describes it during the news conference where they announced this takedown of this criminal fraud ring.
We are announcing today charges against 324 defendants for their alleged participation in healthcare fraud schemes involving approximately $14.6 billion in false claims submitted to Medicare, Medicaid, and other healthcare programs. The largest coordinated healthcare fraud takedown in the history of the Department of Justice. To make matters worse, these perpetrators used the stolen identities of more than 1 million Americans spanning all 50 states to perpetrate this scheme and submit these false claims. But I'm pleased to report that federal agents intercepted and arrested key members of that organization at U.S. airports and the U.S.-Mexico border, cutting off their intended escape routes. We are announcing today.
So they were planning to escape through Mexico, and the United States government was able to get them before they had an opportunity to get away. I gotta say, I love it. All right, real quickly, before we continue, I have a brief message from our friends over here on Rumble. You guys, if you're looking for a smarter way to browse and enjoy your favorite content without ads, you've got to get the Perplexity Pro bundle with Rumble Premium. It's only $19.99 a month when you sign up before the December 31st deadline. Normally, it would be $29.99. And with Rumble Premium, you obviously get ad-free viewing experiences across all your devices. You get access to exclusive premium content with no interruptions, just videos and streams that you love anytime, anywhere. And with Perplexity Pro, it boosts your productivity with unlimited research, unlimited uploads, exclusive member perks, and access to the latest and most advanced AI models for faster, smarter answers every single day. Save over 30% on this powerful bundle by heading to rumble.com/premium before December 31st to sign up and unlock your premium experience. Thank you very much to Rumble and Perplexity for that opportunity. All right, so we're not done with the federal government cleaning up fraud yet. And yes, I see people talking about the amount of fraud that takes place down here in Florida. It is astonishing, but it's not Florida's fault. Yes, we are a beautiful state, so people come here. We're surrounded by water, so there's opportunity for people to take off and leave, and there's always business that's going on. So people love to come to Florida and take advantage of good-intentioned people. One of the first things that happened to me when Lisa and I moved to Florida was I got ripped off by a contractor. He took $500 of my money. He dropped off a couple of $1,000s worth of material, and then he just never called me back, never responded. I even tracked down his family using my investigative skills, and I contacted his father, and I shamed him to his father, and his father actually got him to contact me and get back in touch. And all he did was say that he would give me my money, and then he never gave me the money again. I wrote it off anyways, and I got my money back for the material. But this is just an example of what happens down here. You got to be really careful with who you're doing business with. And I was naive because I hadn't dealt with stuff like this back in Michigan or even in Ohio. But the opportunity for this stuff is rife everywhere. Here is an example. The Susanville Indian Rancheria. This is a follow-up to the James O'Keefe Media Group story about the government contractors that were using the program through the Small Business Association, which would allow them to essentially get contracts that were meant for Indian reservations or other minority business owners. And instead of actually getting those contracts for those people, what they would do is they would use their name, they would pay them a small dividend, and then they would get the money, and then they would even hire somebody else out to actually do the work for an even lesser amount of money. So James here has gotten in touch with an actual resident of the Susanville Indian Rancheria. This is a tribe whose elders were taking advantage of this program to just get free money for themselves, money that otherwise would have benefited the tribe. But instead, these people are living in poverty. Take a listen to this.
To hear how much money that's coming in It's heartbreaking because my grandma has a home on the reservation and there's no insulation in her house. And here you have this millionaire making money off of us. And we're here begging for help. All of the things that were created for us, we don't benefit from. All of this money that you see, we don't benefit a single dime from any of that. Why do we have to suffer? Why do our elders have to not have health care? Why is our people struggling when we could be millionaires, you know?
My personal opinion is that they all need to be taken out.
And of course, she means out of leadership, just for the censors over on YouTube. Want to be clear about that. Now, the follow-up to this story is that the SBA is taking dramatic action to stop these types of fraudulent activities from taking place. You probably remember back when we premiered this story in October, Kelly Loeffler very quickly responded and said that the SBA had terminated all government contracts with ATI Government Solutions, which was the company that O'Keefe Media Group got on camera. They are majority owned by the Susanville Indian Rancheria. They also blocked several of their executives from being able to get any future government contracts or doing any new business with the federal government. That investigation continued, and they were also referring executives for federal charges. All of those people involved in this scam are no longer able to bid on federal contracts. They can't bid on subcontracts. They can't do set-asides or cutouts. They will also not be able to receive any federal assistance. The Department of Justice is also involved to ensure that these people pay in a criminal sense for what they've done to the people of the Susanville Indian Rancheria. Kelly Loeffler followed up just a couple of days ago and said that as part of our ongoing investigation into ATI Government Solutions, they have also now uncovered and suspended a network of 7 additional companies that were connected to the CEO, Firmage Crutchfield. This is the overall owner of all of these companies. And just like ATI, amid this investigation, these companies are now also prohibited from bidding on any new federal contracts, any set-asides. They cannot apply for federal assistance. Their names have all been provided to law enforcement. They are all likely going to be indicted. And this is also going to be spreading out to other agencies within the federal government who have, up until this point, participated in programs like this. These are programs that were made for socially and economically disadvantaged small businesses. But I have people in the chat here who are small businesses and who have never been able to get contracts like this because the big guys, like ATI Government Solutions, would collude with other bidders to ensure that they were the ones getting the contracts and that the regular people who otherwise could substantially benefit from doing business with the government were never allowed to be able to do so. This is now part of a government-wide audit. Kelly Loeffler and the SBA is also asking for anyone with information about scams like this to please come forward and let them know exactly what is going on. I need to say thank you very much to my very good friends over here on Rumble. Artsy Joan, she says, it's great to have you back. Missed you too, Joan. Hope you had a great time in my old hometown at the beach. Cocoa Beach is so beautiful. I love it there. She also says Obama has gained $40 million in royalties from the ACA. So that was actually So I saw that going around over the weekend, and I could not find a source to substantiate it. I saw that Tim Burchett had shared it. The source that was being shared was not a legitimate site, and they didn't actually point to anything that I could verify. However, this is something that I have heard over the years, that there is some direct financial benefit that the Obamas have received as a result of the ACA, whether it's in terms of donations by health companies, health systems to their foundation or through some other method. But $2 million a year since it began, and still as long as it's in effect, who else gains from the ACA? Only the healthcare industry, the healthcare systems, the insurance companies, they all substantially benefit from the ACA. Pharma companies also huge benefit. So I'm still looking into that, Joan, and I didn't talk about it because I wanted to be able to find something concrete. Lee Walden, also good to see you, buddy. He says, I recall an article recently regarding the illegal truck drivers, and the scam was how there were brokers and they were putting these people in positions that they didn't deserve. Yes, we definitely spoke about that. These companies, just like these H-1B holders, they would bring these individuals in. They would help essentially illegally procure them their CDLs. They would pass them without actually having any knowledge of how to drive or going through a driving test. And then they would put them on the road, and that would endanger American lives. It's already resulted in deaths all around the nation. Cyber X Speed, good to see you, homie. He says, challenge match begin. And McSarge08 says, challenge match accepted. Mrs. A. Wadley, also challenge accepted. Thank you, Zach, for what you do. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate that. Now, President Trump, President Trump, my favorite president, has just officially given directive to the State Department, new guidelines encouraging embassies and consulates to deny visas to people who would be a drain on the health system. Now, I pulled up this article from the New Republic because the headline is hilarious. Trump says U.S. visas can be denied to fat people from now on. It is not simply to fat people. It is, however, a denials of visas from people who would otherwise come to the United States to take advantage of our healthcare system. And, of course, people who are morbidly obese, who are not making their way in the world, providing for themselves, who are expecting to come here and just get on benefits or Medicaid and have the United States government paying for their medical care, they are no longer going to be able to do that. So the Trump administration has given guidance to visa officers that they are now able to deny people who are attempting to enter the country if they are obese or have certain health issues. Ultimately, this is all about ensuring that people do not make their way to the United States with the express intention of taking advantage of our healthcare system. This is something that I think we should have done a long time ago. In general, if you are planning to come to the United States, you should not be coming to the United States unless you have the ability to make your way, pay your way. You have to have a job. You have to have a place to live. If you go to France or you go to any other European country, you've got to prove that. You can't show up at the border with a CPAP machine and an IV drip in your arm and no place to live and no job and say, I just want to come in, guys. How's that? You're going to let me come in? You're going to pay for my health care, too, and make sure you give me a SNAP card. Well, those days are now over. This directive went out to the State Department and embassies and consulates around the world last Thursday, and people who are applying for visas to enter the United States can now be rejected if they have certain medical conditions. And again, this is only about people who would otherwise be a drain on the U.S. healthcare system. You must consider an applicant's health, the cable read. Certain medical conditions, including but not limited to cardiovascular disease, respiratory disease, cancers, diabetes, metabolic disease, neurological disease, mental health conditions, very important. All of this can require hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of care, and the United States simply cannot afford to be on the hook for that. This goes out to everyone, and yes, it does intentionally mention obesity, stating that obesity can be connected to things like asthma, sleep apnea, or high blood pressure. All of these can require expensive long-term care. Does the applicant have adequate financial resources to cover the costs of such care over his entire expected lifespan without seeking public cash assistance or long-term institutionalization at the expense of the government and the U.S. taxpayer? Taking into consideration one's diabetic history or heart health history, that's quite expansive, an immigration lawyer said to the Los Angeles Times. There is a degree of this assessment already, just not quite expansive as opining over what if somebody goes into diabetic shock. Nobody is suggesting that if somebody goes into diabetic shock, they're not going to receive health care. However, if somebody is a diabetic and they're coming to the United States of America, you would expect them to already have a routine and recurring supply of insulin, if that insulin is what allows them to continue their life on a day-to-day basis. if they have diabetes and they don't have access to insulin and they show up at the U.S. border and they say, please, boss, let me in. Just allow me to come into this country, and I swear I'm not going to be a drain on your healthcare system. I don't think that it's incumbent upon the American people to just trust that that's going to be the case. So I found this to be a good thing that the administration was doing. Let me see. Also, Trump or Freya and Boys says, Zach, I missed the show when you're at Gart's. I am glad to have you back. When you are gone that long, it shows me how strong our love is. I love you too, homie. Thank you so much. P.S. Just friends. Not that there is anything wrong with it. Nothing wrong with that at all. Also, Trumpet is now a monthly supporter. Trumpet, thank you very much for supporting us over there on Rumble. And then Lee Walden says, Zach, I truly enjoyed Gart on virtual. Really wish I was there one of these days. God willing, I did catch the football game. Did you get a chance to play? I did not get a chance to play. I was taking a nap because I don't sleep very well in hotel rooms, and I'm usually trouble falling asleep, and then I got to wake up super early. So after the panel, I went upstairs and took a nap. And let's be honest, I don't even know how to play football. So I didn't even know they were playing until I saw the video later, but the video was pretty funny. Thank you as well to Boys Blanc 89 over there on Pilled. Thank you to No Thanks Joe, who says, hey, Lisa and Zach, hope you guys had a great, wonderful, fun, and productive weekend. God bless and be safe. Thank you so much. Judy the Lady Pug, thank you for the cookie. And Filter Dog 1 says, define black operations. Black operations, I would be thinking off the books and potentially secret operations. I think that's going back to what I was saying about the operations to go in and take out cartel members, no matter where they sleep. I don't care where it is. I think we need to do it. Filter Dog also, thank you for the can. Appreciate that. Yes, CJ Blodgett, excellent point. You have to prove this annually when you're a resident in Mexico. Doesn't matter what other country you go to. They don't want you to come in if it looks like you're going to try to take advantage of their healthcare system. Now, let's talk about another aspect of the administration seeking to give money to the people who are Americans. The tariff money that we are bringing in right now, President Trump seems to be fairly confident that not only is this going to allow us to pay off the national debt, not only is it going to allow us to fund ongoing projects into infinity, not only is it potentially and likely going to allow us to end the Internal Revenue Service as a source of revenue generation from the American people, but President Trump is also now suggesting that tariffs are going to be handed back to the American people in the form of $2,000 dividends. Now, it says everyone, and that's what President Trump said on Truth Social. However, it's only people making below a certain threshold. He suggested that this will be part of the External Revenue Service, which, of course, he announced in January of this year. The External Revenue Service's goal is going to be to collect tariffs, duties, and all revenue that come from foreign sources. He says we will completely eliminate income taxes for people making less than $200,000 a year. I would fall into that category. I would hazard a guess and say that probably most of you fall into that category as well. Now, of course, the Supreme Court is currently weighing the constitutionality of tariffs. The International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977, as far as I am aware, and the opinion of the administration is that this grants President Trump the right to impose tariffs. It's my opinion that the Supreme Court is going to find that this is already well established in history, precedent, and law. And as such, President Trump is going to be able to continue using tariffs to drive revenue creation for the United States of America. So President Trump said, let's get this straight. The President of the United States is allowed and fully approved by Congress to stop all trade with a foreign country, which is far more onerous than a tariff, and license a foreign country. But is not allowed to put a simple tariff on a foreign country, even for purposes of national security. That is not what our great founders had in mind. The whole thing is ridiculous. Our countries can tariff us, but we can't tariff them. It is their dream. Businesses are pouring into the USA only because of tariffs. Has the United States Supreme Court not been told this? What the hell is going on? And then in an earlier post, President Trump had pointed to our record low inflation. the record high stock market that we are enjoying currently. 401ks are way up there. Trillions of dollars in tariff revenue have been produced. And the foreign and private investment in the United States, as I showed you last week, I think that we are north of $20 trillion in foreign investment here in the United States. Not only is that real money coming back into the U.S., not only is that building up an industrial base, but that is creating an ecosystem of jobs that had been previously siphoned out of the United States of America. So President Trump is promising a dividend from those tariffs of at least $2,000 a person, except for high-income people, which will be paid out. And he says people that are against tariffs are fools. We are now the richest, most respected nation in the world with almost no inflation, record high stock market, 401ks are highest ever. We are taking in trillions of dollars, and we will soon begin paying down our enormous debt, which is currently $37 trillion. Record investment in the USA, plants and factories going up all over the place. A dividend of at least $2,000 a person will be paid to everyone. And then he also said in another post, without tariffs, we have none of the following. And he posted all of the wins that we have just gone over. Now, personally, what I would like to see happen is for the federal government to take Social Security and roll it into the same retirement plan that federal employees and members of Congress have, so that we can ensure that a pension will be there for Americans who have paid into that program throughout their entire lives. I also wouldn't be against this money that they're planning on giving to the American people to be put into a Nancy Pelosi style investment fund so that the $2,000 can become a lot more than $2,000 in the future. Let's see. Lee Walden also says, I'm convinced it's time we stop all immigration for at least 10 years. I am 100% on board with that. Also says, I'd like to hear more about the Sovereign Wealth Fund as well. I think that needs more attention, even though I'm too old probably to get anything from it, but certainly good for the grandkids. So I would like to hear more about that as well. You know, the only thing that I have to talk about in regards to the Sovereign Wealth Fund is what the Saudis have done. And that's what I believe the United States is going to be basing it on. Now, that Sovereign Wealth Fund basically pays for everybody to have a car and a house, to go to college. I mean, you know, it's a wonderful thing. If we could do that here in the United States of America and tie it to productivity and investments, then I think that would be a wonderful thing. Now, here is also Kevin Hassett speaking on this subject, the issue of these $2,000 payments coming from tariffs. Let's take a listen because he would be involved in the implementation of it. And Misbehaving Irishman makes an excellent point. Is this going to be a dividend in terms of an ongoing $2,000? I think that's exactly what it would be, because this is not a stimulus. Dividends are paid out on a regular basis. And if they're tied to tariffs and investment in the United States of America, that would mean that those investments, those tariffs are going to continue to be paid into the United States. And it would mean that the money would be flowing in an ongoing basis.
Well, when we were passing the Big Beautiful Bill, one of the questions was, what should we do with the tariff revenue? And one of the things that I think people believed in the summer was that the best use is to reduce the deficit, reduce the debt. And it's really been working. So right now we've lost almost, or reduced the deficit by almost $400 billion this year. But one of the surprises since last summer is that, although it's not a surprise to Art Laffer, is that since we passed the tax cuts, we've actually had a big increase, almost $200 billion in tax revenue. We thought that it wouldn't be a big reduction like the CBO said, but we've actually had a big increase. And so I think that it's back on the table to think about what to do with those tariff revenues. And I'm sure that the president will discuss with congressional leaders whether, because of all the extra tax revenue, there isn't more room to get checks back to people.
So when people,
I certainly like the idea of ongoing payments to the United States, the citizens of the United States, based upon the financial success of the United States, just as you get if you own stock in a company, a lot more than I like that money going back into the federal budget to be spent on useless things, because oftentimes that's what Congresses want to do. Now, here is also President Trump talking about
our middle income people and lower income people.
I need to refresh it. This is President Trump commenting on this earlier today in the Oval Office.
We're going to issue a dividend to our middle income people and lower income people of about $2,000, and we're going to use the remaining tariffs to lower.
Well, grumpy old man, this would be paid out, as said by President Trump, by the External Revenue Service. And seeing as he's already stated he wants to do away with the Internal Revenue Service and do away with taxes, the insinuation is that, yes, this would be tax-free because we would no longer be needing to pay taxes because everything would be funded through the tariffs and the investment in the United States of America.
Our debt, we're going to be lowering our debt, which is a national security thing. So we're doing a lot of good work. The numbers were reported so incorrectly. The real numbers are trillions of dollars have been taken in or gotten in terms of investment from the tariffs. And so if that were ever reversed, it would be a disaster. Frankly, it would be a national security problem for our country. And nobody thinks it.
No, Cyber, it's not an either or. It's not $2,000 or abolishing the income tax. The $2,000 would be along with abolishing the income tax because there would be no need to tax people. We would just get rid of the Internal Revenue Service. We would have the External Revenue Service, which would be collecting the tariffs and all of the money coming in from foreign investment. This may be the start of that sovereign wealth fund. And I mean, who's to say that they're not going to take that money, immediately put it into some type of an investment vehicle, and then the $2,000 annual or, monthly or quarterly payments would be going to American citizens based upon the performance of that investment vehicle. Could be even way more than $2,000.
It's going to be reversed. I think we had a very good court case. As you know, it's before the Supreme Court right now. But if that were ever reversed, people are saying, oh, it's $1 billion. Some people said, oh, it's $2 billion.
Yes, Alaskans, if you are a certain status, you still receive dividends.
Well, that obviously we can handle very easily. But this is trillions of dollars we're talking about in terms of the tariff income and all the investment income that's come into our country. We're going to issue.
So this is part of President Trump's plan for the golden age. Now, you also, over the weekend, may have heard about a kerfuffle that took place with the BBC. If you have been following the January 6th word or news since the beginning, then you are probably aware of a documentary that the BBC produced where they took a series of clips from President Trump's speech in the Ellipse. They spliced it together to portray President Trump making a statement suggesting, misleading their audience and whomever watched that documentary, if they weren't already in the know, that President Trump had made a specific act for a call to violence or a storming of the Capitol. Now, the people who made that documentary, the Director General of the BBC, Tim Davie, and the Chief News Executive, Deborah Turris, both of them employed previously at the British Broadcasting Company, they have both left as a result of the fallout from the revelation. Now, this is not an accusation. This is a fact. They made this documentary. They released it in October of last year, right before the election. And I'm of the opinion that they did it in order to poison the minds of people who were not intelligent enough to do their own research. Now, the BBC has spoken out. Their chairman, Samir Shah, has publicly admitted that they made what he called an error of judgment. I would call it a gross misuse of power and, at very minimum, misleading and yellow journalism. Shah admitted that by editing these two separate parts of President Trump's speech, they created this manufactured impression that President Trump had called for violence on January 6th. He said these comments not publicly in a spoken form, but in a written statement that he made to Parliament's Culture, Media, and Sports Committee. Now, you might ask yourself, why is the BBC making this statement to the Culture and Parliament's Culture, Media, and Sports Committee? It's because the BBC is a ward of the state. This is the public broadcasting arm of the British government. And if you'll also remember, it was MI6 who were initially involved in the creation of the Russia hoax. In my mind, this is essentially the meddling of a foreign government in the U.S. election system. This is an act of war. Now, whether or not President Trump will state that openly or if he will use it as leverage on British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and the UK, I think time will tell. However, he is not happy about it. He said the BBC said in their official statement, since the publication of Mr. Prescott's memo, and the reason that this came to light is because somebody who worked at the BBC wrote a memo talking about how disgusted he was by what the BBC did, and then he left and he had it published. This issue has led to over 500 complaints. These are now being dealt with in the normal way. It has also prompted further reflection at the BBC. The conclusion of that deliberation is that we accept that the way the speech was edited did give the impression of a direct call for violent action. The BBC would like to apologize for that error in judgment. A spokesperson for Keir Starmer said he does not believe the BBC is institutionally biased. Are you serious?
You sure about that? You sure about that? You sure about that?
Yeah, he also added it's important that the BBC acts to maintain trust. I think that they've done away with that long ago and corrects any mistake quickly when they occur. Okay, this occurred over a year ago using statements that have been made 4 years prior. For any service broadcaster like the BBC, accountability is vital. This is also coming as BBC News has also reported that President Trump has sent a letter to BBC threatening legal action. His legal team is demanding not only a retraction from the BBC, but he's also threatening to sue them for $1 billion if they don't respond by this Friday. President Trump will be left with no alternative but to enforce his legal and equitable rights, all of which are expressly reserved and are not waived, including by filing legal action for no less than $1 billion in damages. The BBC is on notice. I hope that he sues them for $1 billion because they absolutely deserve it, in the same way that President Trump has already sued a number of journalistic organizations here in the United States of America. These people have gotten away with twisting the truth for far too long. There's a reason we call it fake news, because it is totally fake, totally fraudulent, and it's simply not acceptable. All right, real quickly before we continue, I have a brief message from our friends over here on Rumble. You guys, in a world where every click and every tap is tracked, every call and text are cataloged, every swipe is sold off, you are the product. But what if your phone finally worked for you and it wasn't working against you? Meet the Ghost Phone from Mark37.com. It's a smartphone that disappears from big tech's radar. It's not just a phone, it's your digital shield. It's built on Graphene OS, which is an open source, hardened, and 100% Google-free product. There's no bloat, there's no backdoors, there's no data leaks. At Mark 37, they take mint condition refurbished Google Pixel hardware, flagship power, zero e-waste, and it starts at only $425. You get the same great camera, battery, speed, and you simply swap your existing SIM card into the phone. You can keep your same number, and you're live on your own terms. Lots of people are raving about these ghost phones and what they really mean. Zero telemetry, your location, your habits, everything remains private with you. It does not get shipped out with your apps. There is a clean app ecosystem, all of it focused on privacy and the ability to quarantine apps so you can prevent them from spying on you. There's also kill switches, which means you can flip off the mic, the camera, any sensors, and rest assured that they are truly off. There's also very simple migration. You transfer your contacts, your texts, your photos, all of it within a few minutes. People are saying that there is no more constant surveillance. It's gone. I can breathe easily. Never going back to the walled garden again. And if you are done with ads, tracking, and control, then the Ghost Phone puts you back in control of your data. You can check it out by going to mark37.com, MARK37.com. Your private life starts today. You can also use the QR code on screen or the link that you see in the Rumble chat. Thank you very much to the good folks over there at Rumble. All right, now continuing, let's talk about the payoff. Take a listen to this. Our good friend, the press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, took a question earlier today about the state of the U.S. election system. Obviously, they just had an election for Proposition 50 in California. So this question was in direct regards to what's happened in California. I want you to take a listen, and I want you to listen good.
Review by whom and why, and also in this vein, does the White House still plan to issue an executive order banning mail-in voting, and what legal authority do you have to do that?
The White House is working on an executive order to strengthen our elections in this country and to ensure that there cannot be blatant fraud, as we've seen in California with their universal mail-in voting system. It's absolutely true that there's fraud in California's elections. It's just a fact. It is just a fact. They have a universal mail-in voting system, which we know is ripe for fraud. And if you want to deny that, I'm happy to provide you all of the evidence for it. I'd be glad to send that to you after this briefing.
Rigged.
Fraudulent ballots that are being mailed in the names of other people, in the names of illegal aliens who shouldn't be voting in American elections. There's countless examples, and we'd be happy to provide them. As for executive action the White House is taking, yes, we are looking into that. And like any executive order, of course, any executive order the president signs is within his full executive authority and within the confines of the law.
Criminal investigations in California. Fraudulent ballots. Evidence of fraud in California elections. The federal government is in possession of it, and they are taking action on it right now. Very good. Very, very good. The boomerang is starting to swing around. Lee Walden also says, Zach, I'm curious, have you asked General Quast to be your guest for an interview on your show? I think your intellect and his would be a magnificent. Just a thought. Yes, I talk to General Quast every time we go to the GART events, and he said that he would be a guest on the show, but I'm really not doing the regular interviews anymore. And so that's the only thing that's really stopping it. I would need to figure out an appropriate time to work him in. You know, I'm doing like select interviews. I've got one that will be a hybrid tomorrow, so stick around for that. And then I've got a couple that I'm going to be releasing throughout the month. But I work just so much, and finding the time when everybody can do it and then I have to release it separately, it just hasn't happened yet. But General Quast is somebody that I've always wanted to interview. He's definitely on the list. Filter Dog says, buried inside the deal to reopen the government is a provision that would give senators private right of action to sue for millions in damages over their phone records being analyzed by Jack Smith's team. I don't have any problem with that. And that would be benefiting the Republican senators that were spied upon by Jack Smith. I consider that a boomerang, and if that's in there, that's awesome. I'll have to look into that, but thank you for that, Filter Dog. Definitely something for me to dig on. All right, now, also, here is something that I never thought I would see. Our girl, Jasmine Crockett. Jasmine Crockett is now literally demanding that all 50 states abolish Dominion voting machines. Now, for anyone listening over on YouTube, I want to be very clear on this. Jasmine Crockett, Democrat Representative Jasmine Crockett, is demanding an abolishment of electronic voting machines, Dominion voting machines, because she fears that Donald Trump and Republicans are going to rig the elections come the midterms. I never thought that this would be something I would hear her say.
We do know that one of his friends has purchased Dominion. So it's going to be really important for us to educate all states that we can to make sure that their Secretary of States are like, we don't want the Dominion machine. Personally believe that ally purchased Dominion so that he could potentially play with the machines, because we know that they're trying to cheat by changing the lines for the midterms, and I think that they're trying to solidify their cheat potentially with the voting machines.
How long have we been asking to get rid of electronic voting machines? Now the Democrats and Republicans are aligned on this. If this is something that successfully takes place, I will quite literally, I don't know what I'm going to do, dude, but I will be more shocked than I will be for anything else. Now, this is quite stunning to hear Jasmine Crockett suggest that any fraud at all is taking place. However, if this gets us to where we want to be, I will accept it. Now, let's see. Also, G. Fontes says U.S. citizens can still make a significant income, maybe $30,000 to $40,000, using patient assistance programs that pharma companies have, can get premium insulin with doctor prescription at no cost. Yes, that is correct. Insulin deal was done by President Trump, and that is a necessary medication that is available to everybody. Now, yeah, I thought it was impossible. I thought that was something that never happened, but now all of a sudden they're worried about it. Something tells me that we're about to have a very interesting year. All right, now, again, on the boomerang, President Trump has announced pardons for the 77 alternate electors, as well as several top Trump associates that were involved in the investigations in the 2020 election. That includes Rudy Giuliani, John Eastman, Christina Bobb, who has been a guest on the show before, Jeffrey Clark, Mark Meadows. President Trump announced these pardons last night, and these are essentially the people who were ruthlessly and unjustly prosecuted by Democrat prosecutors around the country during the time of the Joe Biden regime, where they were claimed to have attempted to steal the election through the use of these alternate electors. Again, all of those people that I mentioned, as well as other top Trump officials like Boris Epshteyn. Many of these people were charged in places like Georgia, Arizona, Michigan, Nevada. I don't know that the case ever went through in Wisconsin. The Arizona case has already fallen apart. The Michigan case fell apart. Same with Nevada. But each and every one of these people had real significant losses. And because the state prosecutors and AGs brought these charges against them, there was this sort of air of negativity that was hanging over them. Now, the language in this pardon is mostly symbolic because none of these people were charged with federal crimes. However, it opens the door to something else we'll talk about in a moment. And it was, of course, done through the weaponization office of Ed Martin because he is the pardon attorney. And we don't know exactly what they're hoping to achieve with it. However, I believe that they are hoping to set a precedent. Now, President Trump pardoning these electors in the announcement, he mentions that even though these were state charges, the actions these electors were taking were legal, lawful, and they were prescribed by the Constitution. The charges were filed based upon federal laws. They may not have been valid when they were made. However, President Trump is ensuring that each and every one of these people have their names be completely exonerated. Now, Ed Martin, when he announced this on X, he made mention of Federalist 74, which was written by Alexander Hamilton. And the Federalist Paper 74, it deals entirely with the pardon power of the president and why it's necessary for this to be vested in the hands of that sovereign leader. It also references insurrection and rebellion. It's quite interesting that for years, the left has been calling the events of January 6th and the actions of these alternate electors as an act of rebellion and insurrection. So President Trump may be seeking to use their words against them. He also may be pointing to the act of insurrection, which was the attempted theft the theft of the 2020 election in an attempt to rebel against President Trump and ensure that he could not come back to be president yet again. Now, also, I want to mention that on this list is also the one person who turned against President Trump in Georgia. That was Jenna Ellis. I was shocked to see that even Jenna Ellis's name was included in this because she has turned on President Trump whole cloth, and she has become somebody who is no longer in support of him, even though President Trump brought her along and gave her notoriety and a position and, a place within the government. Jenna Ellis was ready to turn state's witness on President Trump and all of the other alternate electors in Georgia simply because she was afraid of going to prison herself. She didn't want to fight. Everybody else wanted to fight. Jenna Ellis turned tail and became a traitor. But now she, too, has been pardoned just like everybody else. Now, there is more to discuss on this because, as I said, when one door closes, another opens. I think that this also opens the door for the pardoning of Tina Peters because Tina Peters' charges, although ultimately were not related to the election, it was related to like identity theft or something. The entire case came about because Tina Peters sought to preserve federally legislated election information that must be maintained while Jenna Ellis was seeking for it to be deleted. The person who testified against Tina Peters also, much like Jenna Ellis, was convinced to do so in their own best interest, to lie on the stand, and Tina Peters was treated very poorly. Now, Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General, has requested the state of Colorado to hand Tina Peters over so that she can be brought into federal custody. I think that they want to bring Tina Peters into federal custody, so then not only will she be treated much better, but also so that they can get her out of state custody. She can then be used as a witness in the case that we are now talking about, the grand conspiracy, this boomerang coming back on those who engaged in a rebellion, in an insurrection, to try to stop President Trump from becoming president again. And Tina Peters also may be given a pardon by President Trump, even though those were state charges, but those charges were totally bogus. Once she's in federal hands, that could mean that the government could just set her free, even if the state tries to fight against her pardon. Now, take a look at this. On the idea of that door opening, the thumbnail that I made for the channel or for the show today, opening the door on the evidence of the 2020 election, Ed Martin says the exact same thing. This is all part of the same grand conspiracy. And through these pardons, President Trump has now opened the door to bring it all out.
Today was pardoning these electors because they did what? They did the exact same thing that in 1960 the Democrats did in Hawaii. There were 3 Democrat alternate electors, and nobody said a word. It's exactly what you do when you operate the Constitution, not when you don't. And Steve, here's the thing: you're Steve Bannon. Out in the country, in the states, frankly, more normal people, regular guys and gals, put their hand up and said, "I'll be an alternate elector to help." They were the county chair, they were a local judge, and Jack Smith and his team and Fannie Willis, and all these, they destroyed these people. And so you had people borrowing against college funds, redoing their mortgage, selling their house,
going into their retirement, selling their house.
And so my point was to the president was we should pardon these folks, and he said research it, and Bondi and Blanche said research it, get it right and tight, and we'll consider it. And we did it, and we got it all together. And I asked probably 50, I didn't ask you, Steve, I should have, 50 lawyers and top people thinking about it. How do you look at this? And what you described was the working document that we put together, which is, it describes exactly what happened. The people in this country operated within the rules and the law and the Constitution, and they were brutalized by it. And so the pardon attempts to start to change that, and I think it's the opening, I know because I'm involved, in getting to the truth of 2020.
So, and that's part of the document that you put in.
It's the opening, because I'm involved, into getting to the truth about 2020. Everything that we see going from this point forward, for those of you who are most passionate about the election situation, you need to remember that everything we are seeing, even if it doesn't mention the election, it all traces back, and it goes beyond the election. It goes back to the election of 2016. It goes back to Crossfire Hurricane and all of the other Crossfire investigations. Also, over the weekend, grand jury subpoenas for not only John Brennan went out, but also Lisa Page and Peter Strzok, the lovers. Remember, they have the backup plan. Trump won't become president because we're going to make sure he doesn't. Well, now we have virtually everyone involved in the original coup to remove President Trump and stop him before he could become president. Every single one of these people are now being called to testify before grand jury to present evidence. These are all subpoenas that are going out down here in South Florida. Captain America, U.S. Attorney Jason Quinones, is the one leading that charge. We've already had indictments for James Comey. We've already had subpoenas go out for John Brennan. We've already had the Walrus, National Security Advisor John Bolton be indicted. These are merely the opening salvo. The opening salvo that gets the DOJ into these people's lives, that gives them access to evidence and subpoenas and records requests. CIA Director John Ratcliffe already referred both Brennan and Comey for prosecution over the summer. And as I said, Jason Redding Quinones is in charge of this investigation. We learned about the federal grand jury subpoenas for Brennan, Page, and Strzok last week. Peter Strzok, remember, he was fired from the FBI in 2018 because he violated FBI policies when he personally launched Crossfire Hurricane, the Trump-Russia probe, back in July of 2016. Strzok and his lover, Lisa Page, discussed this insurance policy to keep Trump out of office. That was Crossfire Hurricane. She said, Strzok said, I want to believe the path you threw out for consideration in Andy's office, Andrew McCabe's office, that there's no way Trump gets elected, but I'm afraid we can't take that risk. That was sent August 15th, 2016, before the 2016 election. It's like an insurance policy in the unlikely event you die before you're 40, or an insurance policy in the unlikely event that Trump is elected in November. There are, ad nauseum, we've gone over all of these text messages in the past. They hated President Trump. Lisa Page was also fired for her part played in this. And this new federal grand jury now subpoenaing former CIA Director John Brennan, former FBI officials Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, several others in the Justice Department's investigation into the origins of the Trump-Russia probe is real. It is ongoing at this moment. Now, not that long ago, we received an official announcement from the Southern District of Florida about a grand jury investigation that begins in January. But there are already other grand jury investigations that have not yet been revealed, which are ongoing at this time. One grand jury investigation could be about one thing. Another grand jury investigation can be about another thing, but they are all tied with the same connective tissue, that grand conspiracy, the plot to stop President Trump. Over the weekend, apparently 30 subpoenas were issued relating to this investigation. And Brennan has also separately been referred for prosecution by the House Judiciary Chairman, Jim Jordan, for lying to Congress. That's another grand jury investigation. Chairman Jordan referred Brennan for making those knowingly false statements during his May 2023 testimony to the House Judiciary Committee. Now, former DNI Jim Clapper has also been hit with his own set of grand jury subpoenas. This has been confirmed by the New York Times. The New York Times is the favorite leak point of the deep state. Clapper was Obama's top spy. Clapper sent that email saying we all need to get on board with this, otherwise nobody's going to believe it. He was in charge of the manufactured ICA. That was the Obama dossier. He was also in charge of ousting President Trump's national security advisor, General Flynn, as soon as he came into office. James Clapper is different than all the rest of these people because James Clapper, several months ago, when he learned that all of this was going to go down, he went on one interview. We played the clip here, and he said, I have retained counsel. He said, I know that they are coming for me, and he has not done a single interview since that time. James Clapper has been very intelligently silent because he knew that as long as he kept talking about this, the criminal conspiracy would continue. It's continued for everybody else. I don't know if staying silent is going to be enough for James Clapper to relieve himself of criminal culpability. In fact, I know it won't be. But Jim Clapper is trying to keep himself safe. I think Jim Clapper is going to be the weakest link in this investigation because at the end of the day, who's more important? All of these people who you committed crimes with or your own neck? A lot of people would say their own neck. Now, also, Paul Sperry has put this out. Obama's intel czar, James Clapper, has until November 20th to respond to that subpoena we just mentioned. These are records related to some key things. His communications with former President Barack Hussein Obama, former CIA Director John Brennan, former FBI Director James Comey, and whomever he spoke with during the manufacturing of this fake intelligence which tied Trump to Russia back in 2016 and 2017. James Clapper and all of these people are in a whole heap of trouble. Now, room 9582. This is that secret room where they put all of this evidence into a burn bag and were trying to squirrel it away before the new administration came in. We've already told you that in the lead up to President Trump being inaugurated for the second term, select upper-level FBI and intel officials were visiting that room. They were combing through all of these documents, seeking to burn and destroy things that would incriminate them. Well, in order to gain access to that room, you've got to have clearance. You've got to have the ability to enter that room, because if you're not high enough on the totem pole, and remember, they classified this at such a level so that only certain people could get in. Well, the FBI has records of all of that. They've got access logs. They've got badges that have to be scanned. And the FBI and the intelligence community and the DOJ is currently scrubbing through all of those logs right now to determine who it was that was accessing these documents in the days and weeks leading up to President Trump's inauguration. That way, they'll know who it was that was trying to conceal these incriminating Russiagate documents in the secret skiff at FBI headquarters. And even more importantly, the people who accessed this room on Monday, January 20th, right before President Trump was inaugurated. Those people would be in violation of 18 USC 2071. Just for shits and giggles. Let's take a look and see what that is. Oh, it's called concealment, removal, or mutilation. Whoever willfully and unlawfully conceals, removes, mutilates, obliterates, or destroys or attempts to destroy with the intent to do so takes and carries away any recorded, proceeding, map, book, paper, document, or other thing filed or deposited with any clerk or officer of the Court of the United States or in any public office, or with any judicial or public officer of the United States, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 3 years or both. At a minimum, the people who accessed that room are looking at several years in prison, and that is not even saying anything about the treason charges or anything else. Now, DOJ sources are also speaking to Paul Sperry and saying that prosecutors have been rolling the SIM public corruption case focusing on room 9582, run by the WFO, into a broader conspiracy case led by the Southern District of Florida and Captain America, Jason Redding Quinones, because of those concealed documents. They were related to the search at Mar-a-Lago. We all know what they were looking for in that search at Mar-a-Lago. They were seeking the evidence that incriminated them. So now, again, we have all of these different connecting tissues leading to the grand conspiracy being investigated by Jason Quinones, Captain America, in the Southern District of Florida. Confirming that is Harmeet Dillon, Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon at the Department of Justice, also confirming that the FBI is currently investigating the records from Arctic Frost. They are also under review for potential legal violations because Special Counsel Jack Smith, who was not properly appointed, subpoenaed the records of more than 400 Republican individuals and entities. She says the relevant statutes, 18 U.S.C. 241 and 242, concern violations of civil rights and conspiracies against rights. Keep that in mind. Conspiracies against rights. Listen to Harmeet Dillon.
Several whistleblowers have come forward to Congress with records from Arctic Frost. This is an investigation that shows Special Counsel Jack Smith and his team had 197 subpoenas that sought testimony, records, and communications from at least 430 Republican individuals and entities. Are you investigating Arctic Frost?
Being a lawyer, I have to put out my disclaimer. My old law firm is on that list of targets because we represented the Republican National Committee and the Trump campaign and President Trump. And so we were among those targets. And so anything having to do with that, of course, I'll be recused from. But it is something that we are looking at. And just to cite the relevant statutes, 18 U.S.C. 241 and 242 concern violations of civil rights and conspiracies against rights. Even though I'm a conservative, even when I was a law clerk, I remember being extremely concerned about Fourth Amendment violations. I believe it is very important that people's civil rights and the presumption of innocence be maintained, and unreasonable searches and seizures are a violation of the Constitution, and we take that very seriously. Jack Smith's conduct, as I have seen so far, is deeply concerning to me, and there are professional and ethical norms that apply to lawyers and prosecutors, and I think some of those may have been transgressed here. So I cannot say exactly what we're looking at right now, but I'm deeply
But you are
concerned about it.
you're reviewing the Arctic frost records
I am
to see if there are
reviewing
any legal
We are reviewing
violations.
it. That is correct.
I can't tell you exactly what we're doing, but let me just quote you the very statutes that would apply in this instance. Gotta love it. Now listen to this. Remember Durham? Remember John Durham, special counsel John Durham's investigation? Well, Svetlana Lakova was the Russian intellectual who was accused of being a spy and having an affair with General Flynn. This was part of the pretense used to destroy her legally and to get rid of General Flynn and try to put him in prison. It turns out that special counsel Durham's team was actually going for a conspiracy charge, conspiracy against rights. However, they were stopped by the Biden administration. And guess what? Now that they're back, now that the Trump administration is back, I think Durham is also back in the background, helping Kash Patel and U.S. Attorney Lindsay Halligan. This is the conspiracy case, Svetlana says, that you are going to see in Florida. Hillary's plan, Russiagate, Mueller team, Arctic frost, the Mar-a-Lago raid, the burn bags, all of it, the same conspiracy against President Trump. These Florida grand jury subpoenas appear to focus on the Hillary plan to tie President Trump to Russian intelligence, Svetlana says. It will examine events, the opening of Crossfire Hurricane, July 31st, 2016, and its origins, which include the conference in Cambridge, England, on July 10th through 11th, 2016, where that Hillary Clinton plan was hatched. The dates encompass the opening of FBI investigations of the Trump campaign advisors, especially General Flynn, based on FBI informants, Stefan Halper, also known as codename Mitch, and Christopher Steele, former MI6 operative. Do you ever really leave? His lies in the Steele dossier, as well as the FISA surveillance, which they were able to achieve listening in on every single person connected to President Trump. After the 2016 election, the Hillary plan became the Obama plan because Hillary was not going to enter office. Obama was the one to step in and direct Clapper and Brennan and Comey to continue. They ordered the fabrication of the ICA, and that was based on Steele dossier and Stefan Halper's lies. It was published on January 6th, 2017, with the aim of overthrowing President Trump before he even took office. Then General Flynn was ousted on February 13th of 2016. The Florida subpoenas seek documents or communications related to the intelligence community assessment from July 1st, 2016 through February 28th, 2017, according to people familiar with them. That date span right there encapsulates everything that happened in that time frame that Svetlana just mentioned. This, of course, is part of the subpoenas that went out to James Clapper. Now, we also have to bring in the State Department, USAID, and the non-governmental organization network that was funded by USAID and organizations like the Soros Foundation. Remember, Leonard Bernardo, who was involved in those conversations early on about how they were going to bring Trump down using the Hillary plan and the fake Steele dossier. Well, guess what? There has just been the release of a leaked Zoom call exposing these State Department officials and the color revolution they are planning with global partners, ex-USAID staff on these calls, admitting that they have been coordinating using encrypted networks and foreign non-governmental organizations to operate against the Trump administration and try to bring this down in the second term. This bombshell investigation was revealed over the weekend by Data Republican on X, and it shows a disturbing inside look at what appears to be a State Department-led color revolution operating through USAID, these foreign NGOs, and left-wing organizations funded by organizations like the Soros Foundation. Now, according to these newly surfaced recordings that were shared by Data Republican over the weekend, these former USAID employees, is there any wonder why we shut down USAID as one of the first things we did? This is the reason, because they were behind the color revolutions and, of course, State Department was involved. They were openly discussing moving internal groups off federal systems onto these encrypted signal chats before the presidential inauguration, and then linking up with international partners to, quote, mobilize against authoritarianism. These recordings themselves were taken from what appears to be a government USAID virtual meeting, and it captures their staff boasting about building coordination structures with Johns Hopkins University in international democracy and conflict mitigation spaces and colleagues from around the world who have already dealt with this directly. In one of these clips, we've got a USAID staff member named Van. I guess they're a she, her. And she describes how prior to January 20th, they mitigated internal communications away from government servers onto encrypted signal chats, linking with transition initiative programs designed for foreign regime change operations. This is something we've been talking about for years. Norm Eisen, former college buddy of Barack Hussein Obama, big person in his government, was the architect of the Purple Revolution. These people at USAID and the State Department would actively instigate color revolutions in democratically elected countries all around the world to destabilize and dethrone governments that they didn't want or that they didn't like. After the inauguration, Van confirmed that contractors immediately set up stop work order websites and private communication groups to coordinate messaging, and they claimed that it was a response to disinformation, when in actuality it was just another color revolution. Within weeks, hundreds of staff reportedly joined these encrypted groups as the agency's leadership was decapitated and administrative leave orders were issued. The Trump administration knew that USAID was already going to be operating like this. And again, this is one of the reasons why they cut the head off the snake as soon as they came in. So we have a bunch of quotes from this meeting right here. We're not going to watch the entire meeting, but I am going to read through this and tell you what they're saying. So Van says, we had all read Project 2025. We were somewhat prepared for this administration, and in other ways, not prepared at all. Ahead of the inauguration, some groups, such as our Office of Transition Initiatives, which works specifically in countries and places transitioning from authoritarian governments or wartime into more peaceful, structured, hopeful democratic governments, were active. OTI has been a major player. They pre-organized because they had organized during the previous Trump administration. They implicate themselves in the coup from the first administration to respond to threats to our U.S. democracy. Also, a group I'm particularly proud of is our Gender and Sexual Minorities Employee Research Group. We are a cautious community and well prepared. We saw the writing on the wall and the attacks that were already happening during the election cycle. We had already moved our group away from the USAID main systems into signal chats to protect our community there, to clandestinize our activities so that we wouldn't get caught. But as I said, we were responding quickly, and immediately we had what's called the USAID Stop Work Order website, and signal groups were stood up. This was done by a longtime implementing partner who are strategic communication specialists, and they moved immediately to start gathering people, creating community, and collecting information. This is also when some of the first lawsuits that I'll talk about were started, all of them filed by Norm Eisen. Within that second weekend, there were more signal groups stood up. Like I said, this is an agency of about 10 to 14,000 people. Within the U.S., we have about 50,000 people who are hired into the ecosystem of awards and grants that are contracted by USAID. Again, all of this grant money was funding the coup against the administration. This community really started gathering on Signal, especially as we saw disinformation about USAID coming out of X and Elon Musk's escalated attacks. Then she confirms the first major protest organized by these networks took place on February 5th. On February 5th, we had our first large-scale protest in which several congressional leaders stood up along with us. Along with agency leadership, many things have happened. According to Data Republican, note at the end of the video the "we" in reference in organizing the February 5th protest. We talked about this when it happened. That was organized by the Soros-backed groups 50501 and Indivisible. This is the first solid link that has been found connecting the No Kings movement, the State Department, and George Soros together. There's another portion of this call where a woman by the name of Rosary Tucci, another person on the call, explicitly endorses the idea of bringing foreign actors into the mix. Legislation is happening. I think we're still in the figuring out phase, but I think, yeah, the 22nd century will be a great place to build those connections. I know Johns Hopkins, the prestigious research hospital, is also working to bridge international and domestic democracy and conflict mitigation spaces. To Hotcell's point, yeah, actually just bringing in, we don't have to be intermediaries either. We can bring in actors or colleagues from around the world who have dealt with this directly on very specific issue sets, whether that's tackling corruption, responding to corruption, or mobilizing around corruption. We can bring those folks in to be facilitators. Again, I think those coordination structures are starting to take place. To justify the international aspect by claiming that this is an authoritarian government, they are already linked up. The government right now, I am positive, is fully aware of what's been happening. But this call, I'm not so certain that they're aware of it. I don't know if they have already gotten this information, but I would hazard a guess that based upon the fact that Data Republican has a high enough profile, and she also is connected to Doge, this information and everything in these calls has already been passed on to the administration. I would hazard a guess and say that this is going to blow up in the very near future. This perfectly spells out the grand conspiracy from within the United States government through the NGO, grant writing, and intel community, trying to inject a color revolution with the help of foreign actors. This is a huge, huge deal. All right, now let me say thank you to Lee Walden. He says, I couldn't help but get a chuckle when Brennan was interviewed by one person on the subway and nobody seems to be there. No one is watching over him. They won't be able to walk down the street. I thought that was great too. Cindy Lee says, hey, Zach, so great to meet you yesterday, and I appreciate the time you took to chat with me. It means a lot. Thank you for everything you do. It was awesome meeting you as well, Cindy. Thank you so much. Also, thank you to Future Objective. He says, holy shit, I just went to search for that USAID video on Facebook. Facebook just took away the search feature for videos. Whoa. Well, winning. Good to see you Friday at GuardZack. Great to see you as well. Here, I will share the Just the News. Oh, shoot. Hang on. Let me reopen the last closed tab. I will share this in the chat, you guys. But I would recommend that you follow Data Republican. You can get to her profile through this article. And that way you can watch the videos yourselves. I'm putting it into all the chats right now. All right. Okay, there we go. Oh, I got to put it over here on YouTube as well. There we go. All right, there you go, guys. All right, so this is going to blow up. And actually, hold on. Let me see how long is this video.
It's happening, I think.
This is only 50 seconds. Here, let's take a look. I'm not surprised that Facebook has taken away the ability for people to search for videos. Come on. There we go.
It's happening. I think we're still
first and last names for every single person on this call.
In the figuring that out phase. But I do think, 22nd century will be a great place to build those connections. I know Johns Hopkins is also working to bridge international, domestic democracy, conflict mitigation spaces. And to Hochul's point, actually just bringing in, we don't have to be intermediaries either. We can bring in actors or colleagues from around the world who have dealt with this directly, very specific issue sets, whether that's on.
This is straight treasonous attempts to bring in foreign actors to destabilize the duly elected president of the United States.
Tackling corruption or how to respond to corruption, mobilizing around corruption. We can bring those folks in and kind of be those facilitators. And so, again, I think those coordination structures are just starting to take place. And, Walt, I think.
I can't wait to see this continue to blow up. All right. Final message from our friends over here on Rumble. You guys, you probably have noticed if you're watching on Rumble, it is blowing up, not slowing down anytime soon, growing really fast, and they are truly building a real alternative to big tech that puts creators first and actually protects free speech. Now, there is Rumble Premium. It's an easy way to upgrade your experience. With Premium, you get the ad-free viewing across all platforms, no pre-rolls, no interruptions, just content that you came for. Plus, you also unlock exclusive content like bonus videos, behind-the-scenes drops, and even more from your favorite creators. I play video games a few times a month, do some informal chats with the audience. Right now, Rumble is offering $10 off an annual subscription. You just go to rumble.com/premium and use the code STUDIO at checkout. Once again, rumble.com/premium. Use the code STUDIO. No ads, more freedom, and content that you actually care about. That is the deal. All right. Now, also, the Supreme Court, speaking of the boomerang, has agreed to hear a case over counting ballots that arrive late. This is thanks in due part to Judicial Watch. This matter was previously in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. The law to accept late ballots was struck down in 2024, and the Supreme Court agreed earlier today to agree to hear this case on whether or not every state in the country may count ballots that arrive after Election Day. Harmeet Dillon shared this story earlier today, and it actually said Election Day means Election Day. Stay tuned. So both the Republican National Committee and the Mississippi Libertarian Party challenged the state's law permitting the counting of ballots that were postmarked by Election Day if they arrived within 5 days of the election. So the court is now hearing this case, and President Donald Trump has always been a big critic of mail-in ballots, pointing to the expansion of that practice during the pandemic when making his claims about what happened in the 2020 election. So this is a big deal as well, and it will be a huge, huge feather taken out of the hats of those who would seek to continue to manipulate elections. Let's see. Future Objective says formal correction, Zach. Facebook took away the video search on their website. I just checked, and on the app, it's still there. Okay, cool. All right, now, Devin Nunes also appeared with Maria Bartiromo over the weekend because we've also just learned that Jack Smith's Arctic Frost investigation also probed Truth Social, Trump Media. Devin Nunes is, of course, the CEO of Trump Media. So he appeared with Maria Bartiromo to talk about that investigation. Now, why is that weird? Well, because this Arctic Frost investigation was an investigation into events that took place on January 6th. Trump Media Technology Group, Truth Social, did not exist on January 6th. Operation Arctic Frost was a taxpayer-funded witch hunt that was perpetrated by the Biden administration, launched in April of 22. They seized government phones from President Trump and Vice President Pence. They got all of the records from members of Congress, and they also went after the alternate electors. As I've already said, they were looking into more than 400 different Republican individuals and organizations. In the same way they went after America First Legal, which wasn't in existence on January 6th. Let's take a look at Devin Nunes's comments on this, because this is another one that is going to blow up in the faces of the people who engaged in this. So Devin Nunes also mentions, just as I have, that this entire thing is part of the same conspiracy. It goes back 10 years. Every single person who is involved is now being caught up in this. We know that it goes to the highest levels, and we also know that it goes to levels much lower. But every single person who is involved in trying to engage in a coup against a duly elected president needs to be indicted. Now, if you go back to 2016, you've got the Clinton campaign, the DNC, and Hillary's emails, all of it designed to take down President Trump. Let's take a listen to Devin Nunes as he breaks it down in light of everything we've just learned.
That because it's a conspiracy, we know it's a conspiracy, you have to prove that it's a conspiracy, then it goes back 10 years, so then everyone would be caught up in this. So, what do we know, like, at the highest level now? You've seen recently with the indictments of Comey and the prosecution of Comey that's occurring in Virginia, that new documents arose, that now we have clear evidence, not circumstantial, more than circumstantial evidence, direct evidence, that Comey knew that this was a cover-up for the Clinton email scandal. So if you go back to 2016, the Clinton campaign, the DNC, they're all worried about the emails coming out because they know if the emails come out that Trump is going to easily cruise to election in 2016. Now, it ends up he easily cruised to election in 2016. But what happened at that time is Comey wanted to keep his job. We now know that through information that's been disclosed. But instead of actually taking that information in 2016 and saying, wait a second, we have the Clinton campaign and the DNC involved in a likely criminal activity hoax to dirty up the other campaign.
Not only that, obviously, Hillary had her own criminal conspiracy with the improper storage of top secret special access program intelligence on her private unsecured email bathroom server that led to the exposure of assets in the field all around the world. But then they covered it up and they tried to criminally implicate President Trump and his team in something that never existed.
They actually adopted that campaign and they used the weaponization of the FBI to target Trump and the Trump campaign that then led into the Trump presidency. So instead of doing what the FBI and the Department of Justice and even President Obama at that time, when they all got briefed in August and September of 16, and instead of Comey and DOJ going and saying, where the hell are the emails? They operated in that whole time knowing that this was just a cover-up, and they weaponized the Justice Department against the Trump campaign.
Because they were seeking to make sure Hillary Clinton was elected. James Comey said in that email, I anticipate that I'll be working for President-elect Clinton, and she's going to be very grateful for my efforts.
In the Oval Office back in 2016. These are the notes that John Brennan wrote, which were declassified by John Ratcliffe. And here's what John Brennan wrote. We actually didn't understand his scribble, so we actually wrote it all out. Here's what he wrote on his notes. Alleged approval by Hillary Clinton on July 26, 2016 of a proposal from one of her foreign policy advisors to vilify Donald Trump by stirring up a scandal claiming interference by Russian security services. There you go. He wrote it all down,
Yeah.
Devin.
Yeah, so easily what do we have here? For 10 years, we've had a conspiracy to do what? What's the law that they broke? What they broke is that they lied and misled Congress. Specifically, they concealed this information. They concealed the fact that they knew that this was a cover-up by the Clinton campaign. As I said in the last segment, instead of exposing the cover-up, they weaponized the Justice Department to go after their political opponents. All of this information was not only hid from the American public, it was hid from Congress over and over again. We know now that Brennan did it. We know now that Comey did it.
Long story short, they are all screwed. They are all now implicated in the criminal conspiracy. Now, in addition to Arctic Frost going after Trump Media Technology Group, just before they went public as a company, J.P. Morgan Chase, at the behest of Jack Smith and Arctic Frost, debanked President Trump's new company. Well, guess what? They were a Florida company, and what they did was improper, might have even been illegal. So now my Attorney General, James Uthmeier, has launched an investigation into J.P. Morgan Chase for debanking the president and his new company at the behest of the federal government. Take a listen.
Today, we've sent a letter and launched an investigation into J.P. Morgan Chase Bank after alarming revelations about their coordinated efforts with Jack Smith and the Department of Justice as part of the Biden administration's Operation Arctic Frost, where we now know Biden officials went after their political enemies. It's come to our attention that JP Morgan debanked Trump Media Group, a Florida-based company, right before the business went public. This is a crucial time for any company, a time where you cannot afford to lose your bank. In addition, we're aware that JP Morgan Bank solicited tons of information from Trump Media, unrelated to their business practices, and we believe provided sensitive banking information to the Department of Justice without real probable cause. This is wrong, we will not tolerate it, and we will hold them accountable. Here in Florida, we've passed legislation to protect our consumers from wrongful debanking, and we will stand by our consumers. Thank you.
JP Morgan Chase is going to be a test case of using that legislation to make private industry pay for doing the behest of the federal government. Now, very short clip here, but Andrew Weissman, the former attack dog for Mueller and the team, also longtime deep state actor, is really beginning to panic because he sees what's happening down here in Florida, and he knows that this is not going to go well for him or any of the other people who were implicated in this coup. I want to remind you that Andrew Weissman has been part of many of the lawfare efforts to try to stop this Trump administration from implementing its agenda. And many of those efforts have engaged shopping lawsuits around to get them in front of friendly judges so that they can get the result that they want to get. Even if it gets overturned by momentarily stopping the Trump administration, they can claim a win. Well, guess what? Now there is a case against him and all these other people down here in Florida where potentially not only do we have friendly U.S. attorneys, but we also might have friendly judges.
And bringing it in a form that clearly is inappropriate so that you can hope to get, presumably, Judge Cannon on the case. I mean, you have a real dichotomy in terms of the way in which you're supposed to behave and the way in which they are behaving.
How dare Andrew Weissman lecture this administration on how they're supposed to behave? This is the federal government, and they're going to take this case where it naturally occurred. You decided to raid President Trump's personal residence seeking to cover up evidence of your own crimes. That means the conspiracy occurred right down here in the Southern District of Florida. This is not the same as shopping it around the entire United States until you find a district judge who's going to be sympathetic to your left-wing ideology. This is, in fact, the proper use of this system. And Andrew Weissman knows that this is not good. All right, you guys. We are going to call it there, and tomorrow we're going to open up with the investigation into the January 6th pipe bomber and a potential suspect that was announced over the weekend. But I've got to end it here because in 3 hours, I'm going to be live on Baseless Conspiracies with my good friend, Ghost of Based Patrick Henry. Gordon is going to be joining me to fill in for John, and we've got some doozies for you. If you thought that there was a conspiracy here on this show tonight, wait until you tune in at 10:30. All right, final thank yous to my friends over here on Rumble. Lee Walden says, Zach, I recall your interview with Ivan Raiklin and his storyboard, but it's just a small piece of the storyboard to come. We'll need a football stadium now. Yeah, we're going to need a lot more than a single whiteboard to put all of this together. All right, final thank yous over here on Pilled as well. Thank you to Judy the Ladybug for the cookie and Good Dog 45 for the can. And I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything over here on Cash App. I don't think I did. What the heck? Let me see. It's got to open up. All right. Daniel, today at 5:24, $1. Well, thank you, Daniel. I appreciate you. He says Q for YouTube QNN. All right. If you're over there watching, Daniel, thank you very much for that. I appreciate it, buddy. And let me also, one more time, request that if you're watching over on YouTube, you do me a favor. Hit that like button. Help us out by sharing the show. Unfortunately, with the way YouTube operates, I am going to have to be taking these shows down at a certain point, so they're not going to be there forever. So get your views in right now while you can. Make sure you share them while you can. And if you want to make sure to be able to check the archived versions and everything that I do, head on over to my website, redpill78news.com, where you can get to my other platforms, which include Rumble, Pilled, Getter, X, and even Kick, even though nobody watches on Kick. It's just there just because. All right, you guys, good luck. God bless. I am passing out the gold pills right now. And I will see you either tonight at 10:30 on Baseless Conspiracies, or I hope to see you right here tomorrow at 5 p.m. for another episode of Red Pill News Live. Peace.